Alrighty, welcome Web Debbies. Today we are going to be looking at some more PHP, or PHP as the kids like to say, and we'll be looking how to begin working with forms. So let's go ahead and make ourselves a new document, and we'll call this one forms.php. Point for the crowd. Okay, so let's go ahead and update our title, and we'll call this PHP with forms. What if we called it PHP informed? Yeah. So moving down. If you haven't built a PHP form before, it's actually just HTML. And here's what it looks like. Let me just change the color here so y'alls can see it a bit better, because I know how y'alls are. Highlighting, fonts, code coloring. HTML form tag should not be that color orange. Let's go with that. No. Form tags. Somebody have a question? Yeah. What? Yeah, man. How do you get some? That's a question for later, buddy. Oh, click on into remote and then go into public HTML and create a new folder called PHP. All right, so moving on. So this is the basic setup for a form. And you can see it opens with form. It has an attribute called action, and it has an attribute called method. And we'll come back and talk about what these two do in a minute. But for now, let's just go ahead and let's create our forms. And there's quite a bit of extraneous markup that goes along with forms. So we're just going to go ahead and just use one form for now. All right. And what you should have when you're all finished with that is you should be looking at something like this that has basic form tag, a place for a label, an input type, text with name and ID set to email, and then an input type submit. So go ahead and go until you've got that much done. So once we have this basic HTML loaded, let's go ahead and check out how it looks in the big browser. So using Firefox, I'm going to go ahead and click on my forms and check it out. It says email. I'm going to type in my junk email and hit submit query. And after it submits, it goes away. So it's this aspect of when stuff goes away that we need to deal with in PHP. And there's a couple of times when we'll need this. Let's say, for example, somebody's filling out a shopping cart and we want to store that information temporarily until they check out. Well, we need to keep that stored. Or let's say that they send an email. We need to keep that information long enough so that we can send out the email. Or maybe it's a blog post and we need to send it to a database. Either way, we need to be able to get this information. Let's go back into our HTML then. And we need to talk about this form tag. So right up here, this form tag that has an action and a method. First, action is the name of the file where you want to send this information that PHP gathers. So if we want to send this, let's say contact, or let's say we had a script called sendmail.php. We could type that in and we can send all of the data to another file, and that file can use that data, and it'll be saved in temporary storage in that file. We have another option, which is instead of sending it to a different file, we submit it to itself. So what this is going to do is take the file, the form information, and send it to forms.php. Hey, guess what? What do you know? We're in forms.php. Welcome home, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, round of applause for us. So when we get this data, what this means is that after we submit the form, since it's sending all the data to forms.php, and we're in forms.php, that means we could get this data. So we could either send it, so we could send it to another file, or we could send it to the same file that we're in. Yeah.
So does it just like magically appear in the file?
It doesn't it magically appears in memory, and we could grab it, which I'll show you how to do next, but it doesn't magically show up. Yeah. And remember, the keyword here is magically. Okay. So now we've got two options for method. We could either do post or we could do get. We could do post or we could do get. Now, most of the time, we use post. And the reason is because whatever information we submit is invisible, meaning that you cannot see it. So if you fill out your credit card information on a form that has method equal to post and you hit submit, on the server they have it stored in temporary memory, but you can't see it anywhere else. And unless they did something programming-wise to display that information to you, you can't see it. We're going to end up using post, but let's play around with get. Let's get going. So this time, when you go back to your form, make sure that you go to PHP Forms.php, that there's nothing coming after it, and then type in an email into the form and hit submit. And when you do that, look back up at the URL up top and check it out what happens. What? Okay. Do it again. Change it. Put something else in. Notice that we have this email value show up in the top of the browser. So what the get method does is it takes the variables and it puts them all up into the URL string. So if we had another form that was for email, it would also, for name, it would also take that information and stick it up top. That's what she said. Now, why is this helpful? It's helpful when you have a URL that you need to save that has variables in it. So let's go to Google, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's a new website. Googly.com. I'm actually into Microsoft stuff, so I'm going to use Bing. And since they're stealing all of, you guys heard about this Google search results anyways, it doesn't really matter. And let's see if Bing does it right. So I'm going to search for that term, and what I get is a whole bunch of stuff on doing it right. Now, up in the URL, see what's happening. And this is tough to see, but if you Bing with me, you'll see search Q equals, and then the search term that I searched for, plus a whole bunch of other stuff after it. Using this format, I could say search Q equals Zach Gordon, and I could affect the search results that show up on that page. So what I've done is, in effect, I have changed the variable or the value of the query. just by using the URL. And again, this is helpful when you want to be able to bookmark something. Because if we use post format, it wouldn't show up in the URL and you couldn't save it as a unique ability. Yeah, this is me right here with some of my buddies. Well, I go by Efron sometimes. It just depends on who I'm hanging out with. So this is me and some of my boys right here. You know how I do. No, I don't do facial hair. Yeah, I had my contacts on that night. Ready for fighting. We were hanging out in New Jersey. Anyways, moving back to our form, if we change this and instead of saying get, let's move it to post. Let's save that, and let's go back and try out our form again. And again, make sure that when you check it out in the browser, that you remove any of the stuff after the URL string, because we really just wanted to say forms.php and not have anything after it. So do forms.php, take the value, fill in the form, and hit submit. And you'll notice that it no longer appears up in the title, but it is saved in memory, or it no longer appears in the URL. So the question you're asking, I know, it hurts, it burns, you want to know. How do I get the variable? Right? All right, we're going to use our good friend PHP, and anytime that we want to use PHP, we got to use our PHP tags, right? So let's go ahead and set ourselves up a little safe place for our PHP, little warm den, maybe mug of tea for our PHP. What? All right. We know from learning last week that if we wanted to set a variable, we do not have to declare it. All we have to put is a $sign because we're all about the money, money, money. Right. Then we do a series of other weird symbols, and this is what it looks like. So go ahead and type this, and you'll see Dreamweaver will pop it up for you sort of automatically. But the format is $_, and then in all capitals, post. So let's dissect this a little bit. We know because of the $sign that it's going to be a variable. That space suggests that it is a global variable, and it's a native global variable. Does that make sense when I say that to you guys? That it's a global variable and that it's a native global variable, meaning PHP in its nature, in its essence, in its semantics, has this underscore and then several other different options. We could say get if we were using the get method, but we're going to say post since we're using the post type. Now, it's about to get complicated. If we look in our form, see where it says name equal email? Whatever value we put in as name here is what we put inside of quotation marks here. So what post is technically a super global array. And it's an array that's created anytime they submit a form by using the post method, and it automatically gathers in all of the input fields inside of it. So we don't have to do anything special on our PHP side to have a name email work, as long as we have in our HTML, if we were to duplicate this and just have two forms, like let's say we changed one to name, like this, all we would have to do in our post is just change that to name, and it automatically recognizes it based off of whatever value we use for the name attribute. So since we have name equals email, we could have post email. So let's go ahead and try to echo that out on the screen. And we'll bygo our conventions of having any nice HTML, and let's just say, let's try to echo email. Okay, first we post it. First you fill out the form, and then it'll show up. Because when we load the page originally, that post method hasn't been triggered yet, so it'll be a blank variable. Oh, we're using post. Oh, sorry, we're not using echo, that's right. There is a difference, I don't remember exactly what it is, but let's just be consistent. All right, so let's go back to my form. I'm going to type in my email, hit submit. Can I get a booyah? Seriously, guys, that's rad. That's so rad. Booyah. If you got it right, let me hear it. All right. So let's try a little validation with this. And what we're going to do is we're going to test to see if when they submit the form, if it was empty or not. So let's say if email is equal to empty, print email required. B. Maybe even though it's not super semantic, I'll just, it's not a good separation of HTML and PHP. I'll just do this for the short moment here. Just for the moment, you know? For the moment, like a good church lady. Look at that Justin Bieber. Kind of looks like a girl. He's so pretty. Okay. So if we try to submit the form and email is empty, it's showing up. Now this raises an interesting problem because if you got this working, you'll notice that as soon as you load the page, it says email required. That isn't really what we want. So we want to make sure that email is blank, but we also want to test to make sure that email has actually been submitted, right? Because if this is just blank, well then, you know, this is going to be blank every time that you just load the page because they haven't submitted it yet. So what we need to do is we need to do an extra little trick that lets us find out whether our form's been submitted. And the way we're going to do that is by adding a hidden, that's right, it's secret, form element that all it does is give us a value to test whether the form's been submitted or not. Come on down with me here, and I'm going to show you this little secret. And let's talk about this a little bit. So what we've done here is we've created an input field that's hidden. That means it doesn't show up because when you're hiding, you don't show up. Yeah, no, I'm sirs. Okay, so the next thing we have is name submitted, and all that is just giving us probably what the name of that variable is going to be when we submit the form, and then we're setting value to true. So what this is going to do is if the form is submitted, then it's automatically going to be set to true. No matter if people enter in an email address or if they enter no email address, no matter what, if they submit the form, this is going to show up as being submitted. So we're going to use this as sort of a condition to test whether or not we should run our validation, because we don't need to run the validation if the form hasn't been submitted. So if the form has been submitted, then we will do the following. So let's come back up to our PHP, and let's say submitted is equal to post submitted boo. Yeah. So there that goes. And what we could do now is say if submitted is equal to true, then test the email. But if the form hasn't been submitted, then we don't want to do that. So we're going to indent our email variable and our if statement here. And we're going to write another conditional that says if submitted is equal to, and it's going to be true as a string because everything that gets passed through a form happens as a string. And then we'll go ahead and wrap everything inside of that submitted button. And what that will do is prevent email required from showing up on page load without them submitting the form, because this code is only going to show if that form's been submitted. I'm going to pause while brilliance seeps into your brain pores. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, to wrap it up, I mean, to put it in a wrap and wrap it, all we have to do then is know about this post submit, because this is what allows us to get the form data. And we know that whatever key we use within this array is the same as the value for the name attribute in our HTML. So now you should be looking at a basic form that asks for your email, and when you type it in, or when you don't type anything in and try to submit it, it says email required. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do a little round of applause for yourselves. And don't worry, if this didn't work for you, you could always just do the creep.